I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Thursday, January the 29th, 2015. The two IDF soldiers killed yesterday in Israel's north were laid to rest today. 25-year-old Major Yochai Kalangel was buried at Jerusalem's Mount Herzl Military Cemetery. He leaves behind a wife and a child. 20-year-old Staff Sergeant Dor Chaim Nini was laid to rest in his home village of Shtulim. The two were killed when their vehicle was hit with an anti-tank missile fired by Hezbollah in Lebanon. The United States condemned the attack by Hezbollah. State Department spokesman Edgar Vasquez said it was, quote, in blatant violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki told a press briefing as well that the U.S. condemned what it called an act of violence and called for calm. Psaki said, "We urge all parties to refrain from any action that could escalate the situation." The European Union called for an end to violence along the Israeli-Lebanese border as well. EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini said yesterday the threats to Israel on its northern border must stop. She also expressed her condolences to the families of the IDF soldiers killed in the attack, as well as to the member of UNIFIL who was killed in the subsequent crossfire. Yesterday, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations called on the UN Security Council to unequivocally and publicly condemn Hezbollah following the attack. Ambassador Ron Prosor wrote a letter to Security Council President Christian Barros Mellet, urging that the terrorist organization be disarmed and insisting that the government of Lebanon abide by its international commitments. And before flying back to Israel early in order to visit with the bereaved families of the IDF soldiers killed in the attack, Israeli President Rivlin addressed the UN Security Council yesterday at a General Assembly ceremony for International Holocaust Remembrance Day, postponed from the day before. In his speech, Rivlin said that the lesson of the Holocaust will never truly be learned, and that while the UNGA is motivated by many different considerations, we must agree that in the fight against genocide, the humanitarian and moral considerations must take precedence over economic, political, and other interests. An international conference on the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe concluded in Prague yesterday. The two-day meeting, called Let My People Live, was organized by the European Jewish Congress together with the Czech government. It opened in Prague on Monday, aimed at finding practical ways to combat the rise of anti-Semitism, racism, and religious radicalism in Europe. President of the EJC, Dr. Moshe Kantor, spoke of the recent deadly attacks in Paris and said that Europe was on a dangerous path and that it was time to change words into action. Argentine Special Prosecutor Alberto Nisman was buried today at the La Tablada Jewish Cemetery in Buenos Aires. Nisman, who died of a gunshot wound to the head, was laid to rest alongside the victims of the 1994 terror attack at the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires, the attack which he had been investigating for over a decade and was set to testify about the day after he was found dead. His suspicious death was first reported as a suicide. However, many believe that he was murdered. It should be noted that Nisman was buried within the regular portion of the Jewish cemetery and not outside it in an area reserved for suicides, apparently reflecting the feeling of the Jewish community there that his death was not self-inflicted. The government of Portugal approved a law today granting citizenship rights to the descendants of Jews persecuted there at the time of the Inquisition. In 1492, after Jews were driven out of Spain, thousands of them crossed into Portugal, whose king initially said he would help them get to other countries, but later changed his mind. The Portuguese Inquisition was established in 1536, where tens of thousands of Jews were persecuted and killed. Their descendants will now be allowed to have dual citizenship if they prove a, quote, traditional connection to Portuguese Sephardic Jews, like through family names, language, and ancestry. Spain adopted similar legislation last year. And looking now at some entertainment news, outspoken American TV personality Chelsea Handler is in Israel. The host of the late-night talk show Chelsea Lately is in the country to take part in a fundraiser for cancer patients and also to explore her Jewish roots. Handler's father is Jewish and she was raised in the Jewish tradition. Handler visited the Western Wall in Jerusalem and also visited the Paris Center for Peace, where she met with the former Israeli president Shimon Peres. Her Israel visit will be featured in an upcoming personal documentary about Handler and her Jewish background that will also look at Israel from social, economic, and historic perspectives. And turning now to our programming for tonight, Thursday, January the 29th, at 8 o'clock, Dr. Shimon Samuels, Director of the International Relations at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, talks about anti-Semitic terrorism at a talk hosted by the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. And then at 9 tonight, Mark Golub sits down with Israeli political activist, researcher, and founder and director of Palestinian Media Watch, Itamar Marcus. That's tonight on JBS and jbstv.org. And that's the JBS News Update for Thursday, January the 29th, 2015. I'm Teisha Bader.